hard to believe, but it's been 50 years since you wrote the Paradoxical Commandments. A lot has happened in the world the past 50 years and also in your life. When you look back, would you change any of the commandments? And how do you see the future of the commandments?
You know, looking back, I wouldn't change any of the commandments. I didn't intend that list of 10 paradoxical commandments cover everything in life. It was meant to be an example of an attitude or an approach to life, to stay focused on what's meaningful even in the face of adversity. But what has happened to me is that what they mean to me individually has changed. So back in the 60s, a lot of social activism, conflict, a lot of things happening. So I feel I was closer to ones like the biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. Or people favor underdogs but follow only top dogs, fight for a few underdogs anyway. Those are the sort of more political, about change. And that's great. Those are still important to me. But as each year has gone by, it's become more and more obvious that the most important paradoxical commandment to me is the first one. People are illogical and reasonable, self-centered, love them anyway. That's about the kind of unconditional love that holds families and communities and nations together. And I just think we need that more and more and more. I think that's so important. So that's clearly my favorite. I'd say my favorite has shifted over time, but I didn't feel the need to change any of them. Let me look back. I mentioned a couple times that the book about the Paradoxical Commandments, the first one, was previewed a few weeks before 9/11 and was actually published a few weeks after. I think it was a week after 9/11, after the tragedy. I was being interviewed by a radio station in Pittsburgh, and they were asking me about the terror attack. Of course, it had a huge impact. It was on everyone's mind. And I said, sure, we need to track down the terrorists, and we need to make our security as good as we can make it. But we can't bring back the people who are lost, and that's just really sad. That's a sad fact. What we can do, though, is in their honor and in their memory, we can try to live good lives. We can reflect and we can focus and we can, live lives of love and hope and focus on who and what is most important to us, and we can honor them in that way. My hope is that the Paradoxical Commandments have helped people do that sort of thing, to stay focused on who and what is most meaningful to them, to stay focused on meaning. And that's what I hope they'll continue to do into the future, because I believe that at the end of our lives, when we look back, it'll make a big difference. If we look back at the end of our lives, I think we won't have many regrets. We may not have any if we look back on a life that's filled with meaning, because we really attended to that. Even more important, I think, if we focus on what's meaningful, then when we look back at the end of our lives, we will not wonder why we have lived. We'll know. We'll know. And that is a blessing that I wish for each of us.
Let me ask you this one last question. One of the successes, I think, of the Paradoxical Commandments is that it transcends all ideological and political boundaries. It's for every man, so to speak. And your life in the past 50 years, at least, has been and currently defined by your work in servant leadership. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, maybe more out of curiosity, but more in an attempt to see your life as a whole, does the Paradoxical Commandments fit in, or in what way does it underscore or uplift some of the principles you have, and I know you believe in servant leadership?
I often include the Paradoxical Commandments in servant leadership presentations because I think it fits quite well. I think servant leaders are focused on identifying and meeting the needs of others. That's very, very meaningful work, and that does sustain them. I think servant leaders regularly do it anyway. And the focus on meaning, it's an intrinsic motivator, and it sustains servant leaders. In fact, I think that's one of the key advantages to being a servant leader, is if you focus on the meaning, you get that energy, that intrinsic motivation that sustains you over time and sustains you when times are tough. So to me, it all comes together. I think most servant leaders do it anyway.